Hey friends, welcome to November's Mixed Media Menagerie. I think I start every month thinking I cannot believe it's whatever month already, and I seriously cannot believe it's November already. We decided to make this month a little bit simpler because we're getting into that crazy holiday time of the year, and we decided with that we would use leftovers. So, better than Thanksgiving. Look at all these amazing papers and bits and pieces and baubles and even pages from my journal that I gathered and kept in this container that are all left from the ephemera drops that we've had in the last, I think it's 14 months or so. So we all decided to use what we had saved. Some of us saved them in piles, some of us tried to gather them around our studio. Just all the incredible leftovers that we had, use them in our journal with some very simple other little prompts to use. We're using liquid watercolor, Q-tips, and rubber stamps with no specific theme, just the leftovers theme. And so I'm so excited to see what Laura and Aaron create this month because our pages are all going to be extremely different. So I started mine out by gathering some of the ephemera that I wanted to use. I kind of kept it pretty plain and just grabbed all these book pages. I really already have an idea in mind, which sometimes I do and sometimes I don't. And this time I have a very, very solid idea that I'm trying to accomplish, especially part of it is because of this burlap paper between, and part of it is because of my idea. So I'm just using the book text, I'm using that drywall tape, I'm using this darker paper because it's going to act like another color for me because we can only use 3 colors. So I'm using the same ephemera on the left and the right. You can see that I'm setting it down on that burlap to then transfer to the right side, just spreading it throughout the page. Some of the pages are really overlapping. I'm trying to create a lot of depth of texture here. The drywall tape, I'm using the sticky part and the part that, what do you call it, the sticky back? I don't know, part as well. And just layering lots of ephemera. Grab these numbers. I love using numbers in my pages, so added those on top as well as some more interest to the background. And now that the ephemera is down, I'm going to use Gesso to embed it into the page. If you watch my videos, you know I do this a lot. It's probably one of my go-to techniques, but I love the way the chalkiness of the Gesso plays off of old book pages. I also love how this sets the pages into the background so they don't look like they're just popping off and sticking off. It also helps create some variance in the paint colors that I put on top. And basically, it's just the Nicole thing I like to do. So I'm using Gesso at full strength and watered down a little bit and spreading it all over the left and the right pages. So that Gesso is drying, it's pretty much dry, but I'm wanting to start on my focal points here. So I know that I want to do more in the background, but I didn't want to completely put the background down until I did my focal point. So I decided that since we're using liquid watercolor and rubber stamps, I wanted to stamp some really large images of something. And I remembered that I had these large poppy flowers and I stamped them on this hot press watercolor paper. If you haven't used hot press, it is so great to stamp on because it's smooth. It doesn't have that tooth of the cold press watercolor paper. So it's really great for stamping on. It's my preference for stamping. I'm stamping it with archival ink, which will not run when I use the watercolor. I'm also going to stamp some extra flower stems and some extra just flower heads in the blank space. I like to stamp more than I need in case I mess up on a couple or I like some better. I also thought that I might want some stems to extend the flower lengths a little bit longer on my pages, or I thought I could flip the stems so it looked like they were tilted the other way since all the flowers are the same. Basically, I'm just giving myself several options while I have the ink and the stamp out, and I didn't want to have to bring it out again if I messed up on a flower. So when I stamp with archival ink and I am going to watercolor with it, I like to let it rest a couple hours. You could also heat set it with a heat gun or hair dryer, but I actually let them rest overnight because I had that option. It was late and I didn't want to do anymore. So this is the next day and I'm spreading out my watercolor. We were able to choose 3 colors this month and I am choosing red as my first color. And I'm going to use a couple different shades of red eventually, but first I grab out this red, thinking it's going to be the perfect color for my poppies. It is the red rose, and it's actually way more rose than red. It's not the greatest color for my poppies, so I'm going to add some black in here and try to darken it. Not really doing what I want, but I'm actually glad I put it down first because I like the effect that it's going to give when I layer my next red on top. So in my head, I'm going back and forth thinking, what am I going to do to make these look like poppies? I wanted them to look like that bright red, gorgeous poppy flower that you see, and it was not looking that way. So I'm going, am I going to need to choose orange as my next color to kind of tone this red down? And adding the black to see if that works, and it's not really working. So in a minute, you'll see what I'm going to do. Basically, I'm just layering the colors on here and playing. I don't have a specific technique in mind other than just having fun and layering the watercolor. So I'm really loving the depth I'm getting by adding that black. It's adding some great shadows, making sure that I get the center of the poppy darker. You know, poppies have that really deep, dark black center, but it's still not, for lack of better words, popping. It's not getting that red poppy color. So I'm still thinking in my head, I'm going to have to add orange, but instead I try the quinacridone magenta and see if that's going to do anything. But it doesn't do anything. It's still the same color family. So I'm thinking I'm going to have to go for orange. So I'm going to reach over in my color palette and grab the next color, which I think is orange. That's what it looks like in the bottle, but actually it's cadmium red. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful surprise. You can see it there now on my palette. It's actually red and not orange, and it is the exact color I need to make these flowers look way more like poppies than not poppies. Now, I think there are poppies that are this color, but I did not want this color poppy. I wanted the beautiful bright red poppy. So I'm layering on the cadmium red now, just like I was doing with the colors previously. These flowers are just going to be a whole bunch of layers of color, a little bit of splattering, and then adding black for shadowing and some dark centers. As you can see, I really just took my time and enjoyed this process of layering watercolor. With watercolor, I always like to start a little lighter and layer to darker because once you get it too dark, you can't always go back to getting it lighter. It's not as easy. And so starting off light and adding layers is the perfect technique to use for watercolors. I also wanted these to look kind of splotchy and splattered and grungy, so I'm going to also splatter some paint on the flowers to add a little bit of contrast and fun and that splotchy watercolor feel to these. In the end, I think I watercolored for nearly like 45 minutes to an hour. I cut a bit of it out, and I'm also fast forwarding this a lot faster than I actually watercolored. And yeah, that's basically the only technique. Lots of layering, lots of splatters, lots of just not caring what's going to happen because I wanted them to look fun. Now I'm adding some more black to those centers to get that really dark poppy center. I'm going to end up layering the black a couple times to get it really dark. Just enjoy a few more minutes of my process here of watercoloring these poppy flowers. And now that they're fully dry, I'm going to cut them out for my page. I want to note here that I have not sprayed them with fixative yet. I didn't know if I'd want to add some more darkening or colors or shadows or shading or darken the center. So I didn't want to limit myself at this point, but in a little bit later in the process, I am going to spray them with fixative. As I mentioned before, I didn't complete my backgrounds because I wanted to see the poppies on my pages and go from there to decide what to do next. And since we're concentrating on using a rubber stamp this month, I decided to just continue to use rubber stamps instead of stencils or something else. I grabbed this rubber stamp also by Unity and Donna Downey, which was the poppy one before, and I'm just going to spread it throughout my pages to add another layer of interest. When I stamp it down, I realized that it's going to look really kind of square, so you'll see I'll add little bits and pieces to the stamped images to make them look not so square, to make them look a little bit more graffiti grungy, maybe look a little bit more stenciled than stamped. Um, and spreading this numbered stamp on the left and the right sides of my pages. And in my effort to continue to use a rubber stamp instead of drawing circles, I decided to use these cool circles. These are probably one of my favorite stamps that I have. It's a Finnabar stamp by, I can't think of by who. I'll have it linked below. I actually haven't seen a place that sells it, but Anna over at Peacecraft Love sells one that's really similar to it. And I'll link that down below for her website. These are probably one of my favorite. I love the newsprint and different things in them. So they're adding that same element of the book text, but in a circle format. So it's continuing that theme of layering my book's text, but in another way, and adding those circles that I love so much. So I did mention that I really had this page planned, and I did. I knew I wanted to cut this burlap page out for a frame, and so I grabbed my stabilo to kind of trace that image. I was gonna not trace it out, but I thought better safe than sorry. I might have ended up having a really lopsided rectangle shape if I had not traced it. So I put a piece of cardboard behind and used an X-Acto knife and a little bit of scissors once in a while to cut that rectangle out to make a frame with my burlap page. So you probably also saw that I had a little overstamp there on the burlap, which gave me the idea of adding some additional numbers to the burlap page to kind of hide the overstamp, but also to add that same interest to the burlap frame. So it blends into the pages, but also looks a little separate. The next few pages were still looking a little flat. They needed some shadowing, so I grabbed my Stabilo All and traced it around those circles, and then I'm going to activate it with water. You can see the grungy shadow that it's making these little circles pop a little bit more and adding a lot of interest to these pages. When I add my paint layer next, it's going to do amazing things with that Stabilo All shading. I also pick up my Stabilo All in graphite just to add a few more grungy tracing marks around the circles. And now that that background layer is finally done, it's time to add some color to it. My second color choice is teal turquoise. So I grabbed the cobalt teal and turquoise from Golden's So Flat line. I love this line. You've probably heard me talk about it a lot. First I'm going to spread the cobalt teal on with a little bit of gesso to kind of tone it down, but also add some opacity to it. I want it to look thin in some places and thicker in other places, and I'm using my finger just to spread it around. I like using it this way instead of a paintbrush to get that grungy kind of dry brush look. I also like how using my finger helps it blend into that Stabilo All and adds that grungy shading into the cobalt teal, and it is absolutely gorgeous. I love this technique. It's probably one of my favorite background techniques to do, using a little gesso and a color and allowing it to blend into the grungy layer of the Stabilo All. So I'm just spreading this throughout the page, avoiding the circles. I want to keep those blank on the inside, kind of avoiding that darker paper because I wanted that to look like another color on my page to give a little bit more variance. And also knowing I'm going to put those poppies in the center, I didn't want the centers to be too crazy. I still wanted the poppies to stand out. I did grab this piece of paper to cover up the burlap page because I didn't want to get any teal on it, and it seemed to work pretty well as a little mask. just continuing to add the background color to the right side. I do add a little water. Once in a while, you'll see me grab my little pink water bottle there to add a little water when the paint just needs thinned out a little bit. And same technique here, just spreading around the gesso, the cobalt teal, letting it mingle a little bit with that awesome Stabilo shading. And that's it. A simple way to do an incredibly grungy fun background. Next, I want to add just a hint of depth of color here. I could have done this with black and mix a little bit of black with the cobalt teal, but since I had the turquoise, which is a little bit, darker of the teal color, I decided to use that instead. I'm just touching the surface a tiny bit. I'm grabbing those areas with that drywall tape to kind of bring it out a little bit, and just a few areas that I thought needed a little bit of a darkening color, not a whole lot of this turquoise, just a little bit to make some more depth of color on my pages. So now I'm trying to solve a problem here. My burlap frame is really flimsy. You can see it there. It's just kind of floppy. It doesn't really turn very easily. So in my head, I'm trying to think what to do to make this a little stiffer. So I decided to add some matte medium to it. Matte medium is basically clear paint, and I thought this would help stiffen up the burlap a little bit, and it does. It makes it just stiff enough that it turns a little bit and isn't so floppy. And while I waited for that burlap to dry, I went and sprayed those flowers with the fixative so that if I get anything on them when I adhere them to the page, the watercolor won't run and my flowers will be saved and they won't be messed up. And now I'm just going to stick the poppies down on the page using some Medina Wakely's Ultra Thick Gel Medium. I don't cover the backs. I want them to kind of have a little space underneath them so that they stick up from the page. They're not totally completely stuck down. I want them to look kind of 3D in a way. So I'm kind of concentrating mostly on the centers. And I'm going to stick the poppies down, the extra stems down. And when the stems are dry, I'll cut them off in a minute. So don't mind that they stick off from the page. And now that those poppies are down and dry, I'm trimming off the stems, and I'm also going to trim off that poppy there to the side of the page. I debated whether I wanted to keep it on or trim it, but I liked it trimmed because it kind of makes it look like a different flower. And you can also probably see that mess on my table. I was really playing with layering some of the other pieces of ephemera to figure out how to top this off, how to add a saying, and in the end I decided just to add this little simple piece of paper that I think Laura had included in one of our drops. And I'm going to stamp a couple of the sayings from that stamp set on some brown paper and stick them down on the pages. And since that little piece of paper in the front was kind of flimsy, I decided to just put another layer of paper behind it just to add to its integrity, so it was a little stiffer on the page when I turned it. So as I'm working on this, I am remembering that I did not use the Q-tip and I need to add one more color. So in my head, as I am, doing this easy job of sticking things down, I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to solve my next problem. And fluorescent orange, always the answer. Either fluorescent orange, fluorescent pink, just adding a pop of color. I chose some orange because orange and blue are complementary, and then it also is, kind of monochromatic with the red, so I thought it would look really good on my pages. Decided to actually fill in the circles with this. I was going to add some polka dots with the Q-tip or some mark making, but I didn't want to add, another element to the pages. I liked how simple the background was. And so I thought adding just a little bit of fluorescent orange to these circles was going to be the answer. I started off with the fluorescent yellow orange and then just added a hint of the fluorescent orange to the tops of them to make them a little two-toned. My memory card runs out here in a minute and I miss some of the putting on of the yellow orange and the fluorescent orange, and so in just a second you'll see the circles get a little bit darker because I missed a whole bunch of the recording. In the end, the Q-tip was actually the perfect tool to use to color in these circles. The roundness of it helped me circle around them very easily. It was really precise. I didn't think it would be, and I think I will pick it up again in the future to fill in circles. It really, really worked well for this technique. And poof, there it is, the darker little bit in those circles. You can see how that helped them to pop a little bit more. It was the perfect element to add to the pages. It really made them me. And I love that I ended up in the end needing to use that Q-tip in one more color. And that is it for the November Mixed Media Menagerie. We use leftovers, better than Thanksgiving leftovers, right? Or maybe not. And liquid watercolor, Q-tip, rubber stamp with no specific theme other than using leftovers to create some pages. I want to thank you so much again for following along with this mixed menagerie journey with Laura, Erin, and myself. We enjoy collaborating each month to create journal pages with a strange collection of things. I also want to side note one thing. As I was finishing this video, I realized that the red of my poppies processed really different in these photos. It's actually a little bit more red, so go hop over to Instagram and hopefully I'll have a better version. At this point, it was too late for me to reprocess them and reinsert the photos into the video, but they're just a little bit more red in person, not as pink. I just wanted to side note that. We'd love for you to follow along with us this month, trying out liquid watercolors, Q-tip, rubber stamp, hashtag it over on Instagram, Mixed Media Menagerie. That is a tongue twister, so we can find you. Make sure to check out Laura and Erin's video as well. Thanks so much for watching.